our website following the presentation for those who would like to share it. So let's start. For our agenda, we have certainly some time dedicated to looking at the highlights of the report, looking at some additional research that Kendal David has been working on in terms of the P&A and also the SBA, which she will be sharing with us. And then we do want to leave some time, some important time for us to have some conversation and questions and conversation. And we will wrap up within the hour. So with that, we do have a full agenda, and I would like to turn it over to Sara Mayo, who will talk a little bit about this report, but also tell us a little bit about who this report has been dedicated to. Sara?
Let me speak without being muted. Thank you so much, Kim. I wanted to speak first about Lance Dingman. Many people in the audience knew him and worked with him over the years, and he was certainly very influential in my understanding of the P&A in the times that I've met him and talked to him about it. And Lance unfortunately passed away this past summer. But he still, his advocacy lives on, and I hope will continue for many years on this important issue. You'll see Lance in this picture. He's in the bottom row on the right side. And this was at Queen's Park in 2001. There's another member in the audience here, Rob Wilton, in the sunglasses in the second row, from McMaster, who had done research on living conditions in RCFs and interviews with tenants. And then the picture was taken by and this was of the Residential Care Facilities Tenants Coalition, which was a Hamilton group for many years, led by Lance. And the picture was taken by Tom Cooper, who's also in the audience. If he, I'm trying to unmute Tom. He can either speak now if he has a chance, or at the end, because I know that he was very close to Lance and very close to these issues over the years. And so in that year, they did increase the P&A from 112 to 116. So their efforts were not in vain. But the struggle continues to bring more attention to this issue. I'll start by talking about who receives the P&A, because it's not very well known. It's part of our social assistance system. It's in the ODSP Act, but it doesn't even have a name anymore in the regulations. It's just called budgetary amounts for other cases, and the name P&A sort of stays informally. And so it's given to residents living in a residential care facility who need supports to live in the community. And those supports are very basic: housing, meals, and medication. And the municipalities that have this RCF type of housing, including Hamilton, they use provincial homelessness funding that goes to shelters and homelessness prevention and homelessness services. And so with that money, some of it goes to the RCF system, and they subsidize about half the cost. And the residents' social assistance check, for most people, that's ODSP, covers about half the cost. And kind of in the end, the residents are kind of net 149 from all that, all that kind of shift in money to the operator and from the city from their check. And then they're left with 149 a month, which has been frozen since 2019. In contrast, the portion that goes to the operator does receive inflation increases. Not all municipalities have a subsidized RCF, regulated RCF system. Hamilton has the largest in Ontario. About 700 tenants access the RCF subsidy. Ottawa also has a large system, and Toronto has some, but they use different names. So second level lodging used to be a name, and now domiciliary hostels is another name, but there's even more names than that. Windsor's another place where there's quite a few. And the PNA has to cover basically everything except food in the home. If you want food outside the home, then you do need to pay for that. If you want, your clothing, your bedding, your outerwear, your toiletries, your oral health products, if you need sunscreen, if you need, transportation is not covered. It used to be in Hamilton, but that's not, it's not a sort of specific subsidy that like it used to be. And then internet is another cost of living that is not, research by McMaster in 2022 showed that most residents did not have access to internet, to email, or even really, they're supposed to have access to phone, but they don't really have privacy with that. So residents find it very difficult to communicate with anyone outside their homes. I'm going to go through a few slides, zooming in on each of these one at a time. I just wanted to let you know that they're all in the report. You can see in more detail, and that's on our website, sprchamilton.ca. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see on the front page a link to the report page. So this is the PNA. It's been a very low amount for a very long time. In 1992, it was $112 a month. And at that time, Ernie Lightman's report, A Community of Interests, about unregulated unregulated housing with supports. At the time, there was no formal RCF system like there is now, but there was a lot of still people living in these kinds of homes without any regulation, and there was quite a few problems, including some fires and some violence at some homes. And so there was a big inquiry, a commission about it, and the commission had a lot of recommendations, but one of the things they said they heard the most from tenants was the low PNA, and that was in 1992. At 112 at that time, it was much too low. It was the number one complaint that residents had, and since that time, most governments have frozen it for most of their time in government. So it wasn't until about 2012 that we saw increases. So there was increase from 116 to about 130, and then a few dollars a month, a year increase in the Kathleen Wynne government. But even those increases did not keep up with inflation. And now since then, it's been 149 since 2019, frozen at the level of $149 a month, even though, like I said, operators get inflationary increases for their portion, and also other ODSP clients who receive regular ODSP basic needs amount, that amount and shelter amount is increased with inflation. And so people on the PNA are still in the ODSP Act, but for just an unknown reason, no justification has ever been given as to why these people with disabilities do not get any increase to their monthly allowance. And at the same time, we know, of course, OW, so in the Ontario Works Act, they also do not get increases to Ontario Works has been frozen since 2019 as well, which has had huge problems in the communities all over Ontario that has caused as well, and hardships, and also social impacts from low social assistance rates. And then this is the same chart. The bottom two lines are the same in terms of the actual PNA went from 112 in 1992 to 149 now. If there had at least been inflation increases, it would be 224. But I added this chart to think about what if there had been more foresight back in 1992 in Ernie Lightman's commission about unregulated housing, that they had listened to tenants then who said 112 is way too low, and had doubled it then to 224, and then kept up with inflation. Then it would be a more reasonable amount, and now it would be 445. And that's a sort of missed opportunity that didn't happen then, but we can rectify it with some of the proposed remedies I have at the end of this report. And that we need to, whatever decisions get made today, whether it stays frozen or it finally increases, will have repercussions for years to come. And so we really need to not think just about today, but what it's going to be in 10 years. And then one of the sections of the report, I talk about the implications of the low RCI, the low PNA. Obviously, the hardship for tenants, but then there's also broader social implications as well, and impacts. And so this is talking about this gap between, we know the gap between ODSP and OW are bigger and bigger as OW is frozen and ODSP has inflationary increases. But we have that same issue even magnified with the PNA and ODSP. The PNA staying at its low level, and the ODSP basic needs amount increasing every year. So there's a gap. So for people who live in an encampment or in shelter or in independent housing, they're eligible for the basic needs amount of 809. If you live in independent housing, most of that is going to your housing because the shelter amount doesn't cover your housing. So that's so it's not a there's other factors going on in this calculation than just what's shown in this. But certainly if you're in a shelter or an encampment and you are offered housing, most often you will be offered an RCF because there are spots in RCFs available. But you then find out, either you already know because people have told you, or the worker tells you, yes, but you won't be on regular ODSP anymore. You'll be getting a PNA of $149 a month. Your food is provided, but the lack of the drop in independence, in financial independence from having to go lose $660 a month in income is drastic. And we know in Hamilton that it's definitely contributing to higher rates of encampments and shelter use, because there's no the disincentive to move into an RCF is just there's also not just the financial impact, but then there's also the privacy impact in terms of most of the rooms are shared, and you don't have choice about who your roommate's going to be, and there's no room to bring over friends or things like that. So the lack of independence, both on the privacy side and then also on the financial side, definitely contributes to RCFs being underused to a certain extent, and also RCFs being the PNA being the encampments and shelters being overused. So our proposed remedies are many, but certainly, as we know, there's the Raise the Rates campaign is calling for doubling of social assistance. So at a minimum, like all other social assistance rates, including OW and ODSP, the PNA should be increased to $300 a month. And municipalities should be able to set their own rates. Right now, they're limited by the province to that $149 a month. And then the whole system should be scrapped. Kendall's going to be talking about there's also a whole other name for a very similar benefit called the Special Boarder Allowance, which is actually only $71 a month. So both the SBA and the PNA need to be eliminated and just replaced with maybe something called the Human Dignity Allowance at a much higher level, at the level of the basic needs amount of ODSP, and that they get inflation increases, and that the impact of these changes that the province should be measuring the impact of these changes on homelessness encampments in particular. And so here's a chart that kind of illustrates what it could look like. So if the PNA, if the PNA and SBA were completely eliminated and changed to the Human Dignity Allowance set at the level of the ODSP basic needs amount, it would be 809. And then in the interim, at a minimum, there needs to be an immediate doubling of the PNA and SBA. And then that and that as well, OW and ODSP rates be doubled. I'm going to pass it over to Kendall, and then we can have questions.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Kim, and everyone at the SPRC Hamilton for the really important work that you're doing to bring attention to this issue. And I appreciate the invite to be here with you today and to be involved in this work more broadly. So hi everyone, I'm Kendall. I'm a PhD candidate at Carleton in the School of Social Work, and my dissertation research was about how ODSP works for people who are living in congregate settings. So that includes basically, a whole big group of people, about 60,000, more than 60,000 people who receive drastically reduced benefits because they live in congregate care. So this includes the folks who are living in RCFs in Hamilton and across the province, who fit into it's kind of a tricky, there's all sorts of tricky names and things that go on here, but fit in under ODSP as boarders and receive these special boarder allowances. But also these rates apply to folks living in any congregate setting where their landlord or housing provider is also responsible for providing food to tenants or to residents. So so my research is about this system and how it works province-wide. And and I've got this report that I've just put out that describes the different rates and and kind of draws out the policy directives and the different kind of regulations that are playing out to create this system where people are only entitled to $71 or $149 a month, which we know is cruel. It's a deeply inadequate rates of support. So the report, I have a QR code on the slide here, and there's a link as well. And I think the slides will be shared afterwards if folks want to check that out. The report talks about the ways that this system apply province-wide. It brings attention to the fact that there are, about 18% of the overall ODSP caseload who are subjected to these rates. Also means about 18% of the ODSP caseload who have not been impacted by the current government's efforts to index ODSP rates. So these rates are static. They were not included in the regulation shift to index ODSP rates. So there's a pretty significant group of people who are being left behind and are not included when the government celebrates those indexing efforts. And I wanted to also bring up two other kind of points, some key findings that came up from my research. So I did a policy analysis of the ODSP regulations and policy directives, but I also did interviews with people who are receiving PNAs, and talked to several people who are living in RCFs, and hearing about the impacts of deep poverty, severe poverty for their lives and their social connection. One of the things that I heard was that these rate structures are based on an assumption that people have their shelter and food needs met already. They're still inadequate, even if that was true. But I heard so frequently about the ways that people feel kind of forced to use their allowances to compensate for inadequate food provisions and poor shelter conditions in the places where they were living. So pretty significant portion of their very minimal allowances are being used to compensate for inadequacy and neglect within these sites. There's lots of variation between facilities, but this was a common theme. And the other that feels very relevant to our conversation today, of drawing attention to this issue, drawing attention to the lack of research and political will that there has been to change this system, is that because people are living in really severe, really deep poverty, and because of the conditions within these sites, folks are really disconnected and really isolated. It really exacerbates the isolation that can be inherent to living in RCF. So most of the people I spoke to do not have their own phones or internet access, a device to connect to the internet if they go out and want to do that. And so this means that there's some significant impacts on the individual advocacy that folks are able to do, the self-advocacy folks can participate in, but also the collective advocacy that they can engage in. It's hard. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but we know that it's difficult, and that's a big problem for us to be grappling with, I think. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Awesome. So this issue is really significantly under-researched, and so I'm so excited that the Social Planning and Research Council is taking up this issue, is talking about it, and I'm so grateful for the work that Sara is doing on this report and getting it out into the world. I wanted to highlight that this population is excluded from all of our federal disability data. They're excluded from the Canadian Survey on Disability. So we know that there's also some impacts that are playing out there in terms of the kind of bigger picture of what we know is happening with social assistance and with disability poverty across the country. And it really gets kind of hidden also in our provincial social assistance figures. I had to file a lot of freedom of information requests to get a sense of how many people are impacted by this issue in the province. And it's been quite a challenge. So all of that, though said, despite this really significant lack of research attention on the issue, community organizations, community organizers have been documenting and pushing back on these conditions for at least 50 years. So one of the examples I wanted to highlight is there's a community-led magazine that was published through the 1980s called Phoenix Rising, that was by and for people who had interactions with the psychiatric system. So a lot of people who were leaving psychiatric institutions and getting set up in community housing. And there are a number of articles in these magazines that talk about RCFs, that talk about boarding houses, and really highlight the inadequate conditions within them, and how deeply embedded the terrible social assistance system is in creating these conditions and maintaining them. So again, there's a QR code and a link in the slides if folks want to check that out. We know from Hamilton, from the work of Lance Digman and the RCF Tenant Coalition, that again, despite the lack of research, the lack of academic and political attention on this issue, that community members, community organizations know that this is a problem and have been pushing back pushing back on this issue for a long time. So very, very, proud to be a part of this this ongoing work and to be engaged with the folks in Hamilton who have been and are leading the way to address this issue. And I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. And again, thank you to Sara for moving this forward and having me inviting me to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Kendal and Sara, for giving us that, insightful perspective about the importance of this benefit and also what we can do. We do have, I do invite people to put their questions into the chat. If you've got some questions, there is one question here asking Kendal and Sara if you can comment on the new Canada disability benefit and some of the barriers that residents and tenants living in RCFs and care homes might face in accessing that new and critical financial support.
Yeah, I deliberately did not put the Canada Disability Benefit in this report because I didn't want to take any pressure off of the province. This is really a provincial issue. They have social assistance rates are entirely in their purview, and they need to address these low PNA and SBA rates and not use the Canada Disability Benefit as a way of saying, oh, look, they could have access to that. They don't need higher rates from us. So that's sort of why it's not, that's the main reason it's not mentioned. But for sure, in terms of advocacy and support that needs to be given to RCF residents would very likely, all of them, if they need the supports of an RCF, they very likely meet the definition of a disabled person for the Canada Disability Benefit. But the issue is, how can they access it? And in Hamilton, there is a lot of work from the Greater Hamilton Health Network, the family health team in Hamilton, to better connect primary care to RCF residents. They have people living in congregate settings is one of their main focus priority populations. And so in Hamilton, through their work, I'm certainly hoping that those doctors will be very proactive with RCF residents to help them do the assessment that needs to be done by a doctor to do that. But it's not, that's not guaranteed, and it's certainly not the case. It may not be the case in other communities. And so, yes, do they even know about it? They don't have internet access. And do they, and then how do they get access in terms of filling out the forms, in terms of having a doctor who understands their functional limitations? Because it's not about your diagnosis, it's only about your functional limitations, and doctors are not trained on those specific things. So it's certainly something that advocates need to be out in the communities and supporting people to access that benefit. And then within the home, the inequity that could happen if someone is more connected, has better supports, is able to get it, and then someone isn't, that may create some tensions in the home if some are getting it and some aren't, unlike the PNA, which is more even, I guess.
Yeah. And I would just add that I think we'll probably see barriers to apply in terms of, fees to get the forms completed and filled out. And again, just challenges with tax filing in general. I also would be, I'm concerned about the possibility for residents to also not see that money because it gets clawed back not through OW or ODSP, but through the systems in place that the municipalities use to determine the rate of subsidy for folks. So it's a really kind of complex puzzle that plays out to determine how people like how people actually get their PNAs. And there's a combination of usually, social assistance payments, but also this funding through the province, but that is delivered by the municipalities through like homelessness prevention funding. And anyways, I think there's some possibilities that the way that municipal regulation structure, how they assess income for residents in order to determine the rate of subsidy, that if that the CDB could basically just go straight to owners, RCF owners, instead of being in the pockets of residents. But I think there's some more work to do to figure out what's happening at the municipal regulation level, and to advocate to make sure that people will see those checks once they can get them.
Okay, and I also see, thank you both for your comments on that. James has asked, when we ask council about improving RCFs, they often point out that it's mostly privately owned and for-profit facilities, and so they have only so much ability to affect change. Can you suggest how we can move away from for-profit facilities? Great question.
Yeah, in Hamilton, we have a big opportunity for that, because right now the city gives $8.5 million a year to RCF operators for those 700 beds. And they are doing a review of the RCF subsidy, and the report is supposed to come out in November. And so it's just of the RCF subsidy, it's not of the PNA, but they have made it clear that they're going to have an opt-in process and an opt-out process, and opt-in to the new system with new criteria and new supports that they're going to have to do, and new quality and outcomes that they're going to have to meet. And opt out, meaning people can continue operating themselves, but they won't get the subsidy. And there will be probably some major changes in that, and there has been for many years exactly that complaint that how much of the RCF subsidy, the 8.5 million that goes from the city, how much of that is in profit instead of really into supports for residents. And there's been research that has shown that operators who are nonprofit versus profit oriented get that there's more kind of limitations on meals and food and things like that are detrimental to residents. So there's an opportunity in Hamilton with this review of the RCF subsidy system that hopefully they will make it a criteria that you have to be nonprofit, or if you are a private operator, then your books at least need to be open so that they can see how much is going to profit versus wages and other food costs and things like that. So there is an opportunity for that. This review of the RCF system is an important one and is needed, but their reports that they've done leading up to this review have not mentioned the PNA, even though really they can't review, their review is not going to be successful unless the PNA increases, because part of what they want to do is they want to integrate RCFs into the homelessness system in terms of being having a common intake and having more supports for people transitioning out of homelessness and being able to live and be supported in housing and not be evicted. And those kinds of support, if the city wants the RCF system to be part of the homelessness system, then the PNA has to increase, because right now people don't want to move into an RCF for a lot of reasons, including the low PNA. And so really the city needs to do more advocacy with other organizations and directly to the province to say the PNA has to increase if we want to have an improved RCF system in Hamilton.
And Sarah, you mentioned in your report that, you know, Hamilton really has taken some leadership in terms of using some of those housing dollars to help support the P&A. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about what that model looks like, and if you think that that is a model that could be used in other places successfully.
Yeah, I mean, there have been many delegations to council. I mean, Lance Dingman made many delegations to council, and councillors have been very very supportive of RCF residents. A lot of them, many of them have visited RCFs and understand the problems with them. And so there has been they have done, so for instance, James just spoke and he is working with the public health. So one of the issues is around climate control. They did a survey, so the accessibility committee for persons with disabilities in Hamilton with public health did a survey and found that less than half of homes have any air conditioning, and only about less than a third of homes have central air in all rooms. No, less than of the ones who have air conditioning, it's only in one room most of the time. And so some of them are just in one room. So essentially most bedrooms in RCFs are not air conditioned. And that is a huge problem, obviously, in our with increasing heat waves. And so that's an example of the city working with community and working to improve RCFs within the system they have. They can't increase the P&A because the province sets a limit on that. So they have increased it. Essentially, they're supposed to get the SBA. Their check is actually, you know, kind of the SBA $71 amount, and the city uses its subsidy to up it to the max P&A amount of $149. So in that way, they have improved slightly conditions for residents, and other cities don't necessarily do that. So Hamilton leads the way, but you know, and it's in a pretty minor way compared to what really needs to be done.
Another question has come in. Do we know if RCF tenants are each assigned a caseworker, MCCSS employee, similar to OW and ODSP recipients, even if it's privately run?
Kendal should speak to that.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, tenants have a caseworker through like OW or ODSP if they're an OW or ODSP recipient. And then I'm not sure exactly how it works in the different cities, but I think in most cases, people are connected in through whatever kind of municipal intake system there is for RCFs. And so most of the people that I spoke to had like a caseworker through the city in addition to their caseworker that they were assigned through MCCSS. But it's all run, it's all regulated. All of the interactions that people are having on the housing side are going through the cities, even though the funding is flowing from the province and then through municipalities. So I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, yeah, there's two kind of separate people, the ODSP or ODSP, or sorry, OW or ODSP caseworker, and then, you know, a city caseworker through the municipal department that's responsible for RCFs.
But in Hamilton, I mean, I don't think they would consider themselves caseworkers. There's like one or two employees who like deals with the subsidy system and making sure that RCF operators are complying with the Schedule 20 of all the requirements that the operator has. And so, but there's not caseworkers in Hamilton from the
Yeah.
city to RCF residents, but they may have it through agencies like Canadian Mental Health Association or St. Joseph's, the assertive case management, and other supports through schizophrenia services and others. So it's not, it is a hodgepodge of services depending. And yeah, do they have a caseworker is a very good question, because then how do they contact them? It's already, it's a sort of callback system now for most ODSP call recipients. And the privacy issues of how do you call someone back where there's like a communal phone in the living room and they don't want to speak, with their operator nearby. We've certainly heard that from RCF residents, that they feel like their calls to ODSP are monitored by the operators.
Most of the folks I spoke to had not had any contact with someone from OW or ODSP in a long time, for in part exactly that reason, that they would call and leave voicemails to their caseworker, and they don't have a personal phone line for their caseworker to call them back. So I heard from folks who would call every single day and for months on end would not hear anything back. And the other major issue I would say here is also that, for better or worse, people get set up pay direct arrangements with OW or ODSP through RCFs or whichever kind of type of facility they live in. And so their social assistance payments flow through the owners or operators in many cases. And so then that also means there's, they get handed either check or in most cases cash from the owner of their building on sometimes a weekly basis. And they do not have the kind of control or oversight of their finances because it's all flowing through the landlord. So then there's, again, also issues around control and autonomy that play out in terms of people's access to their caseworkers because there's an intermediary. And and I had heard a couple of cases also where folks had been essentially coerced into setting up pay direct arrangements with RCF owners who prefer that arrangement. So yeah, lots of challenges there, I think.
And certainly that autonomy piece is really important to human dignity, isn't it? Being able to have control over oneself and one's finances, and to make decisions regarding that is so important, which is what I found interesting, Sara, in terms of some of that, what you were showing in terms of the deficit of what people would be receiving if they moved from, being more independent, versus going into an RCF. That significant loss of finances is a loss of independence as well. We have a little more time. Is there anyone that has any other questions or comments? I'm hearing, I think transit should be provided to RCF tenants and OW recipients, says one of our participants here. If they want to say fair assist is truly equitable, people should at least be able to go to the library or take part in rec passes.
I think the city does in Hamilton. I think they do have a system for subsidy of recreation that they put in a few years ago, from what I recall. I think Tom Cooper has unmuted himself. I was just going to offer for him to speak. He was very close to Tom. Tom is the head of he was very close to Lance. Tom is the head of the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, and they are working on PNA advocacy. And so Tom, go ahead if you want to say anything.
Yeah, thanks, Sara. And thank you, Kendal, as well. I think both of your research will be a really critical shot in the arm for continuing this advocacy. And as you heard, as you saw in the picture, this advocacy has been going on for a long time. And Rob Wilton's on the call. I saw Bob Wood here as well, Henry Avilas, Jennifer Chivers, Cole Gately. So lots of community voices have added theirs to really the outstanding advocacy from people like Lance and other residential care facility tenants over the years to try to highlight and amplify the challenges. And I think both of these reports really outline the need to improve the incomes of individuals living in residential care facilities and care homes. And we talked about a few of those reasons. One of the other ones, and Sara just touched on this, is really around social inclusion. And right now it's impossible for people living in residential care facilities to eke out any sort of social existence outside of their home on $149 a month. And that's really critical to ensure personal well-being, and it enhances the community as well when people are taking part in community activities, volunteering, just being a part of the community and not being separate from it. And so thank you both again. Thanks SPRC for outlining and making this forum available on a really critical issue. And again, I hope it will be the shot in the arm that we need to continue this advocacy and push it forward into 2026 and see a real change.
And even before then, because there should be in November starting budget consultations provincially, right? And so there's an opportunity there for advocates
Absolutely.
to bring up to send to the budget consultations the fact that this needs to be prioritized in the budget.
Absolutely.
I see a comment from one of our participants in Halton. I've called in from Halton. This has been very helpful. Halton RCF locations are concentrated in Halton Hills. These folks are extremely disenfranchised. We've been talking about this with folks in action in particular. This research has shed much needed light for us to move that community dialogue forward. So thank you, Risha, for that comment. And Laura has a question. When you talk about landlords giving out money, do you mean they are also trustees?
Yeah, I think that question is for me. No, they're usually not trustees, but there's a whole system of, it's called Pay Direct, that folks can set up through OW or ODSP that, for folks who don't live in congregate care settings, it can mean that, payments for utilities or rent go directly from, the province to whoever is owed. And it's supposed to kind of facilitate so that, facilitate payments so that, tenants or residents, recipients are not stuck with like late fees or arrears if they are missing rent payments or utility payments. But for the ways that it is kind of plays out through RCFs is then the whole check from social assistance goes to the owner or operator, and then they are responsible for dispersing the amount that people are eligible, like people are entitled to keep, so that the P&A rate. Yes, so not just the shelter amount, but the P&A gets sent to landlords. Exactly. And this is, I think, in part because of this really kind of complicated overlap of municipal and municipality funding, municipal funding through homelessness prevention, and then also social assistance. It's a big mishmash. So the landlord gets all of it and takes like the $71 SBA from OW or ODSP and $78 from the homelessness prevention fund, and then gives that to make the $149 for P&A for folks. But then they have full control over what that looks like. So, I heard from folks who, their landlord would take a cut to cover toilet paper or hand soap. Yeah, or they didn't trust didn't trust tenants to have the full 149 up front, and so they got it in increments weekly, and they had to line up and wait for it, which people found quite degrading. Yeah, I hope that clarifies, Laura.
Thanks for that question, Laura, and Kendall also for that response. To think that people are only getting on average $5, less than $5 a day, and that would be rationed is quite dehumanizing, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so where do we go from here? I mean, where do you see that we as a community, and I say community in the largest sense, so people from out, from across the province, how can we move this issue forward?
I think two things. I think there's opportunities more in provincial media. I think we really need to work individually our contacts to get this in the Star, and also maybe on like Radio Noon on CBC. TVO doesn't have the agenda anymore, but there's they still cover news. And the Queen's Park reporters, to really educate them to cover this issue would be very helpful. And then in the budget consultations that are coming up for advocates across the province, to include that in the things that they bring up in their recommendations to the government for the budget would be really important, because it's affecting all sorts of social services. Many different social services are encountering residents of RCFs, and it's affecting them. That there's and also the fact that there is housing in RCFs available, but that isn't being taken up because of the low RCF, the low PNA.
And I would just say, I'm seeing in the chat someone asking about like one recommendation to move this forward. I think as a researcher, I am kind of constantly for years, I feel just like appalled and shocked that we're not, that PNAs, that these like the congregate care rates have not been really considered or integrated in the broader conversations that are happening in communities and within advocacy organizations about poverty, about disability poverty. Again, I think there's so many reasons for that the data has not been there. There have been so many gaps. I think there's a lot of structures in place that kind of hide or shuffle this issue away. I think it's for folks who are here are invested in and thinking about poverty reduction as it is, and I would say doing what we can to integrate these rates in our broader conversations about poverty and income supports, and disability, social inclusion, I think is really important.
Well, it sounds like there are a lot of ways that we all can make a difference if we share this information and keep having these conversations outside of this circle that we're having today. I would really like to invite people to download the research, both from Sara, Mayo, and Kendal David, who are our speakers here today, to learn more about this issue, and to share that information. And I think that's one of the ways that we can always help disseminate information, is to share it and to keep having these conversations in community. This is a conversation we haven't had in a little while at SPRC, but we plan to continue this dialogue with you, and to partner with you on initiatives that can move this issue forward. So just on behalf of everyone at SPRC, and I just want to thank you, Kendal David, for the research that you're doing, for joining us this afternoon, and Sara as well, and for all of you who took the time out of your day to join us and to learn a little bit more and to also hear how you can take action. So thank you very much. You will be able to view this online later. Please share it and reach out to us if you're wanting to partner in any way further. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Have a great
Kim.
day.
Thank you, Sarah.